Well, so many of you know me already, but my name's John Pena, and I'm an artist in Pittsburgh here, and do public art, comics, drawing, sculpting. Also do a project called Daily Geology, where every day for the last 15 years I've made a drawing about my day. So it's just a cumulative collection of drawings, thinking of it like geology in the terms of sediment being deposited and then eroding in that kind of natural process, and how it can shape large things that are almost imperceptible on a daily basis. So that's kind of the context for when I met Mr. Tony. And so I'm going to dive into some slides and kind of walk you through meeting him and how our friendship unfolded over time. 105, thank you very much for that. All right, so this is Anthony Mainiero, AKA Mr. Tony. He was born on Mayflower Street in 1920. You might recognize his house by the ornate trees that frame his property. I first met Tony when I interviewed him for a project about the history of Larmer. This is my first ever drawing of him. And in that he was talking about having recently lost his wife. When a senior loses his wife or vice versa, they're left by themselves and the walls start closing in, and that's what hurts. I tried to pay him for his time, but he wasn't having it. Instead, he asked if I could bring him a bag of cement instead. He's a cement man. He also needed some help pruning his tall branches. I'd wanted to learn this for quite some time, so we got to work, and thus our friendship began.
Growing too tall, and I didn't want to get it out of range, that I couldn't handle it anymore. And when I did, I topped it, and then as I topped it, it grew like an elephant, and I kept it that way. And what I do is get up there and I trim it real nice, and I keep it angled, and it doesn't expand too far out that it disturbs anybody. And it's a marvel. That's all I can tell you.
Where did you buy it?
I bought it at Sears, where Home Depot used to be.
What year?
Oh, about 1960.
And there's his house. You can see how much he sculpted it over the years. There's photos I didn't bring for this presentation, but where it was very bare and it wasn't actually like this, and then he grew up everything over the years. This is one of the early drawings, May 1st, 2018. Do you have time to take me to Aldi's? Of course he says Aldi's. I had meetings all day, then stopped to see Tony. He made us crackers with cream cheese. While at Aldi, I noticed how fast-paced our world is when set against Tony's speed. Afterwards, we went to visit his wife's grave. His name was above hers, with his date of death left blank. On the way out, he asked if Jess and I had picked out our tombstones yet. That was great. Tony told me that the pillars at the Mellon Institute were each quarried from a single piece of limestone. I took him to see him in person, and Tony was so excited. We then walked to the Carnegie Library and got free ice cream sandwiches that they were giving out to incoming Pitt students. I think he got 2, actually.
Yes.
And there he is. And there he is hugging. He talked a lot about how he remembers when they brought these in on the train yard through East Liberty to deliver them to Oakland, and how they had to shut down the streets, right? Because it's monolithic, limestone. Tony came with me downtown while I ran some work errands. He kept describing the buildings with names I'd never heard. Later, I looked them up and learned they were all the original names from the 1920s through the 1970s. So he was like, that's the Lowell Penn Theater. And I was like, I think it's called Heinz Hall. And then I later looked it up and realized that it had actually been Lowell Penn longer than it had been Heinz Hall, which is really funny to think about. The Cultural Trust saw my post about Lowell Penn Theater and hired me and Tony to take field trips and make drawings about his memories of downtown Pittsburgh. Here we are in front of the Stanley Theater, AKA the Benedum Center. Now the interesting thing about this is East Liberty had a ton of theaters. Were they like 9 or 11? It was like a bunch of theaters. And so they would only ever go downtown to see a live show, which I thought was really interesting. All the theaters in East Liberty, they had everything they needed in East Liberty, as Tony would always like to say. Tony has an Aldi coupon for $5 off of groceries at the Penn Hill store only. Every time we go shopping, he tries to use it. When I picked him up today, I asked, you got your bag and your coupon? He smiled and said, "Oh, we'll get him to take it this time." And then, of course, they didn't take it. But here's the best part. I still have the coupon.
Oh.
You can see a chandelier in the background there, too, which is really great. I finally got around to asking Tony about his cool detail in his house. He explained that the mirror was so big and lovely that he and his wife decided to center the room around it. Here's the actual mirror. So what's really interesting about this is, when they bought the house, it was in disrepair in 1949, so they had to bring it back to life. And they put this wallpaper on, but if you peek behind the mirror, the wallpaper stops because they didn't touch the mirror. They left it exactly where it was. They just worked around it. And that's the reason that little soffit detail in the light fixture is the way it is, because they just left everything the way it was and worked around it. The wallpaper he also got at Baskin's on Baum Boulevard. I know way too much about that wallpaper. He probably still has scraps in the basement. Here we are in Tony's basement, where he's showing me his amazingly well cared for gravity-fed furnace. I'd never seen a gravity-fed furnace before. I'm normally used to forced air. I didn't know, it's like an elephant, right? Like with these trunks coming out everywhere, and then the weight of the air pushes it down and forces the warm air up. So it was it used to be actually coal-fired, and then they turned it to natural gas in the 50s or the 60s. I don't like it, but I gotta talk to someone about dying. After our senior luncheon, we went to Target to get Tony some milk. We talked about the importance of talking about death. While going through old photo albums, we discovered the original telegram Tony's wife, Eddie, sent it from Italy in 1946. It outlined where her ship would arrive in New York. Aspettami, it said, "Wait for me, Eddie." And here's the telegram. Very beautiful telegram. That's a photo of them when she first came over from Italy in 1946, 47. Here's a quote from Tony with a photo of them. "That's me and Eddie on our honeymoon in Oakland. We stayed a couple of nights at the Shenley Hotel. We couldn't afford it, but they had a veteran discount, so we were able to stay." That's us in front of the Carnegie Library in 1948. And what's really remarkable about this is, what do we notice about the Carnegie Library back there, everybody?
It's not.
It's not what?
The same color.
It's not the same color. That's all soot, right? They had to sandblast it in the 90s to clean it to make it look the way it looks today, right? So it's just like seeing those histories is really wild. Also, those sycamores, look how low these sycamores are here.
Yeah.
Next time you go to the Carnegie Library, look at the sycamores there. The pandemic hit Tony hard. I made sure to call him more often. Then, when the weather got nice, I started coming over again. See how I shaped this here? He had been shaping, he called it a skirt. He had taken a shrubbery and shaped it like a little skirt underneath. So he's very excited about that.
He fell.
When I visited, we worked in the yard or ate ice cream and talked history. I made sure to touch his shoulder and tell him I'd be back soon. It's so easy to forget how important physical affection is, especially during the pandemic, right? So during the pandemic, we were working with the seniors doing other projects as well, but I had been drawing about Tony for a while now because it happened, we met in 2017, so I decided to put together a small book, like a little mini zine about Tony, and that's what I published. I did about a print run of 200, and those sold out immediately, so I did another print run of 200, and then those took a little longer to sell out, but I'm on my 4th print run actually now, which is really wild. I read the whole book this morning, then I lay down, and when I got up, I read it again. When I first published Mr. Tony Book 1, Tony never read it. A year later, he finally did, and was really taken with it. From that moment forward, he asked when I was making another book. Tony. When my uncle was dying, our mother sent us kids over to bathe him, give him a shave, and rub his arms and legs. I dropped off Tony's new medical alert pendant. We talked about old school 1930s palliative care and how his Italian parents treated death and dying.
1934 when I made those flower pots. It's like the Tower of Pisa, but it still works. Believe it or not.
Did you make it leaning or did you make it straight?
No, I made it straight. But, see, it's cracked here. But this one stayed straight.
Yeah.
1,000 bricks for $10. The excess bricks. Then he made the porch.
So you'd walk through here.
Walk through here, and then go in the back, and it was the kitchen. Two garages where I had the chicken coop and the rabbit there, and the pigeon coop back here.
Yep.
Was on top, with the steps going up.
I have photos of that, yeah.
Yeah, and then.
And what address is this? Would this have
This
been?
175 Mayflower. Let's use it up.
So here's the drawing I made about that. Walked around the neighborhood checking on the seniors at 175 Mayflower. Tony showed me the still standing piers he built with his father. Yeah, he always called it like the Tower of Pisa, which I thought was really funny. So, something else really interesting. At this time, I was also digitally archiving all of his photo albums because I was like, these are incredible. We have to like preserve these. And so I was scanning them in because he had so many of them. And this is him at 17 years old in 1937. His brother Joe here, and then two neighborhood people from the neighborhood. And I saw these flower pots up here, and I was like, those flower pots look so familiar. Why do I know those? Because they're still in his front yard today. He moved down the block 250 feet and brought them over to his house, and now they're here in his front yard.
We made the college trade school. And so was the bench. That's
What year?
1934.
1934?
Yeah, I was 14 years old, going to summer school. I liked it. Look at this angle.
So he made the flower pots at 14 years old, going to Connolly Trade School, and he made the pots in the bench, learning a trade, basically. He was a cement man early on, apparently. In honor of Memorial Day, Tony dressed up in his uniform, and I took him to Allegheny Cemetery. When I brought him home, he grabbed my hand and said, "Thank you for taking me around today." He paused and then said wistfully, "If there's a heaven, I'll see you in it. And maybe you can even drive me around." I could not stop laughing when he said it. There's Tony. She asked to buy my house. I said, "You'll have to wait until I'm dead." What did she say? She hung up. Just a normal, you get a lot of telemarketer calls, but then you also get calls to flip his house too. So he always had the best response to them. That's a good mix. You want it like polenta. Tony came over to help me mix and pour a footer for our new steps. He was so excited to be working outside on a crisp and sunny day. Tony has a tendency to describe textures in the language of food. It's a very Italian thing, I think. Maybe European. There's us mixing. I think we mixed, oh my God, we mixed so many bags. I don't even remember how many bags we mixed for that. The deep one. There's us resting. And then there's the finished steps. And then there's old Coda. He loved our dog Coda, and Coda loved him a lot too. I'd pick up and say, "Emerson 2928, and she'd connect me. Jess found a telephone book from the 1950s, and we found Tony's number in it. It had letters and a 5-digit number. Later I asked Tony to explain how it worked. And so the way it worked back then is you would name the neighborhood, and then the 4-digit number afterwards, and then the operator would connect you. And there it is, right there on the red here. Emerson 2928. I stopped by on a beautiful day, and Tony needed help putting a new tarp on his car. Before I left, he also asked me to trim a couple of branches of the tree behind him. There's that old tarp. I get these terrible cramps that wake me up. Tony's body keeps breaking down, and it takes a heavy psychological toll. I can hear it in his voice. I can feel my own inevitable decline. All I can do is make space for the grief and fear. We kept it inside. We didn't want to burden other people. But what did that do to your heart? I asked Tony if he ever had friends or people he could talk to about grief, loss, fear, and death. I'll start with the roof and work my way down. After the luncheon, I asked Tony to draw a picture of his house from memory. One time I asked him about painting his house, and he said, "I always start from the top to hide my mistakes." So there's his drawing. There's his drawing next to his house, which is really incredible. He made sure to include the water and gas line. And if you notice it, it's the shape of his memory is so beautiful because like the sidewalk, the gate, the long walk to the house, and this, which looks a little like a bench. Oh, I thought it was a bench at first, but it's actually this elephant tree. He described it as the elephant tree he was trying to draw. I thought it was the bench too, but he's like, no, it's that elephant tree. All right. Oh, and of course, oh yeah, go back one. Of course, he still made reference to the carriage house back there. Does anyone know what a carriage house is? Where the carriage goes back in the day. Because of course this house is built in 1870, so of course there's a carriage house. Laura and Charles came to interview Tony about his memories of the city steps. They didn't want to take up too much of his time, but he wasn't having it. They stayed about 3 hours and will definitely be back. So Tony had me over originally to say, hey, we got to get to Aldi, I need some groceries. But by the time they were talking for 3 hours, he's like, we'll do that later. Because he just wanted to keep talking. There they are together. You got it all right? Yeah, I'll be okay. Took Tony to Aldi. When he went to take the cart back, I heard hesitation in his voice. He usually enjoys the act of giving it to someone, but the fading light strained his vision. He took his time slowly moving along the cars. I watched him all the way. Tony was the saddest I've heard him in a while. The rain's been keeping him stuck inside. Okay, but you gotta get outside today. The rain lifted today and the sun came out. I encouraged him to get out, even if only for 10 minutes. This is the next day. I stopped by Tony's and he was out on his porch sweeping up. He caught me up on what he did. I walked up, along around, then all around East Liberty. So thank God he got out of the house. If I don't live to eat all this, you're gonna have to help me out. I took Tony to Aldi to stock up on Raisin Bran crackers and cream cheese. After checkout, he dropped this zinger. He had a really playful way of talking about the end of his life. I think, of course, mitigating fear, anxiety. This one's easier to read than the last. I showed Tony my second draft of Mr. Tony Book 3. He loved it and we read through the whole thing together. I incorporated a new handwritten digital font to improve the legibility for his fading vision. So if you look at my books prior to knowing Tony, they were smaller and the print font was smaller. And he strained to read it, so I had to adapt because I wanted him to be able to read it. And then I realized, oh my God, I need to be making bigger books because we all have fading vision, right? So it really kind of expanded my way of thinking about how to make work for more audiences, What do you think? I brought a bunch of books over for Tony to sign. Every time he signed one, he held it up and said, what do you think? Look all right? Every single book.
Okay, come on, right?
Looks good. I took Tony to the bridge to see my work. We walked down Tranquil Trail and then up the wooden stairs to the clay courts. Tony took his time on each step. When we got to the top, I listened to his heart to see if it was racing. I called Tony today. How are you? He answered with a question instead of a greeting. I started laughing. Then Tony started laughing. These were those little mundane moments that were so charged with beauty. It was just like the things we all do all the time, right? Like it just stands out so much more. You're starting to lose your hair. Yeah, I'm getting older, buddy. Tony pointed out my thinning hair, and I wondered if it scared him a little. His perception of me as one of youth, and to see me aging must stir something in him.
Yes,
Hi, Mr. Tony, I'm a big fan. It's a pleasure to meet you. We tabled at the zine fair, and nearly 1,000 people came out. Tony got to sign books and talk with so many people. He was so surprised by how many people already knew so much about him. He had no concept of social media that I'd been posting about him and that he had thousands of followers or anything like that. He had no reference for it. That's us at the zine fair. That's book 1, 2, and 3. Laura had the brilliant idea to take Tony up to Mount Washington to take in the city. Afterwards, we went to Aldi and loaded up on raisin bread. It was the first time I was able to watch someone else performing the magical and mundane task of loading boxes of raisin bread into Tony's cart. He's making sure the price hasn't changed. Once you hear the pop, you can turn it. While visiting Tony on a cold and dreary day, he asked me to show him how to use a newer can opener. He was having trouble with the initial puncture of the metal. Later, we ate some chicken noodle soup from 2020. I'm fine. What do you think happens when we die? You think there's a hereafter, or is it just over? I'm not sure, buddy. Well, I hope when it comes, it's quick. If not, I'll do everything in my power to be by your side. Maybe you could just hold my hand. Of course. I'll steady it until you get a feel for it. When I asked Tony if he wanted to try out the trimmer, he was hesitant at first. I held it up for him until he got his footing. Once he did, he excitedly took over. Trim it. Okie dokie, love ya. At some point in the last 6 months, Tony started saying I love you and getting off. Love you too, buddy. This was just recently, December 2024. Now we're getting into spring 2025. I've spent every spring for the last 8 years with Mr. Tony. Here we are on March 16th, 2021, exploring the emerging daffodils in Tony's garden. Here's our first spring together in 2017. Tony is proudly describing the bricks in his yard, which were made less than a mile from his house. See those bricks? They say Ward. They were made from clay right under our feet. Ward was just across the Lincoln-Leamington area. When we took a trip there, he showed me where the brickyard used to be, but it had turned into a dump because once they dug out all the clay, they filled it with trash, as one does. Okay, give it a good pull. Watch your fingers. Here we are in 2018, prepping his lawnmower for the season. Safety first with Tony every time. My mother-in-law is under these leaves. The next year, we were cleaning up his family plot at Mount Carmel Cemetery. Every spring with Tony became a study in resurrection. My knees always ended up on the cold earth as we explored the emerging bulbs. Later that year, Tony asked me to help him bury a wild turkey that had taken sanctuary in his yard before it died. I was up all night thinking about him. The deer had been taking the sidewalk. In 2023, the deer had taken up residence in his yard. He showed me a bent bush in his yard where the deer liked to sleep. Just the safest place in all of Pittsburgh.
Do you want some more flowers?
He was always trying to get me to take flowers, especially to bring home to Jess. How you been? I've been working in the grass. I cut the side and I'm taking a rest. It used to be that I could do all of it in an hour, but now I got to rest The next year, he slowed a bit and needed to rest more frequently. But when I came over, he excitedly filled me in on what he'd been up to. This is my first spring without Tony. I stopped by his house to tidy up his yard and study the daffodils. I thought of the incredible springs we spent together. This year, I began to prune our apple tree using a pair of Tony's shears. I remember him saying that you want to shape it like an umbrella. He always put the accent on the beginning of the word, umbrella. After knowing Tony for 8 years, I can definitely notice a change in me. He embodies a present-mindedness that encourages me to slow down and be more deliberate with my thoughts and actions. After some time, I began to internalize Tony's voice and came to notice myself seeing the world through his eyes. In this way, immortality emerges through our connection with others. If I live to be an old man, maybe someone I meet will, in a way, also get to meet Tony.
But if I go before you, I'll try to get back to you somehow, spiritually, mentally, or otherwise, or I may even shake your bed. Because a lot of old people back in my father's generation, they believed that if he went to bed and the bed shook a little bit, that was the way they would communicate with each other.
What? Really?
They would get that shock, that spiritually shock that would vibrate the bed.
And that's my presentation. We have time. If anyone has any questions, we have time, actually. Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. Do you want the microphone? Here, let me give you the microphone. Can you pass that?
What was the secret to being so active at 105?
104 in 3 months.
But plus the womb.
What's that? Plus the womb. His act, I mean, he was a mailman. He just was in motion all the time. 60 years he worked for the Postal Service, so he was just up and down the steps, walking all the time. Not a big smoker. Didn't ever smoke, didn't drink. Maybe have a beer every so often when he was younger, but I don't know. Yeah, I think a lot of it
That's
was...
his mail.
Yeah, that's his mailman uniform right there. Yeah, not the formal overcoat, but this is what he would wear on his mail route. Yeah, his mail pants and his tie and everything, yeah. Yeah, that's the best secret, at least, that I can think of that he shared. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, Shake is coming around with it.
I'm gonna get my steps in.
Hey, that mailman route.
I guess the comic it made me think, it made me think of like Kevin Huizenga or like or Ben Catcher. Are those like artists you're feeling affinity to or anything?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Especially in terms of like the quiet meditations, right? Like those artists in particular, they're very much paying attention to these quiet moments that are almost imperceptible in daily life, you know, and then taking them and then expanding them in this really beautiful way and making them kind of palatable so people can read them and be touched by them. Yeah, for sure. Those are two artists that definitely stand out to me along that regard. Yeah. Any other questions? I think if anything else stands out. It's okay. We don't have to have questions. Well, thank you all for being here. This was really incredible. Yeah, thank you for being here. Yay!